Hey ho, dear ones. I have a raw and vulnerable episode that I'm sharing with you today that I have notes for, but I'm just going to allow it to flow through me. I'm really tuned into your energy to feel what you need on a soul level in the moment in time that you hit play. I recently had a Galactic Akashic Records reading with Debbie Solaris. I had Debbie on my podcast and I was on her YouTube channel, which we also released as a podcast episode here on the show. And I'll link to those episodes in the show notes. But Debbie is a true expert on the Galactic Akashic Records. And just to give you some background here, the Akashic Records are often described as an energetic library of every soul's journey. They contain information about your soul's experiences, lessons, gifts, and evolution across lifetimes. The Galactic Akashic Records expand that perspective beyond planet Earth. They explore your soul's experiences not only through the Earth lifetimes, but also through lifetimes and evolution connected with other star systems and civilizations according to this spiritual framework. Well, many of you know about the near-death experience I had in 2009. And if you haven't, we'll also link to an episode where I share the whole story in a 3-part series. During that experience, I connected with a collection of consciousness that called itself Live. And this consciousness, Live, guided me through my near-death experience. In one of the most profound, not one of the most, in the most profound spiritual experience I've had in my life. And there's a piece of me that wants to say, and hopefully there's not another one coming down the line that was more profound than that, because that was an experience that was both extraordinary, amazing, enlightening, and really difficult and painful at the same time. But what was happening at the heart of this near-death experience, which I'm going to refer to as an NDE, is that I was healing from several, but one in particular, cataclysmic past lifetime traumas. So these were traumas that were so large in scale and intense that it was in the category of a cataclysm. And there was no healer or therapist that I could visit in this lifetime that could help me heal from that. There was no human that could help me heal from this. But I also needed to be incarnated into human form in order to heal. And because of the nature of how I was meant to heal, I incarnated into a lifetime, my current lifetime, into a person who was very, very cut off from their spiritual gifts for the first 32 years of life. So I lived a very grounded, very 3D, I gotta see it to believe it. I didn't even really think too much about spirituality. I tried to be religious as a kid, but organized religion didn't really suit me. I mean, I felt the calling for a higher power. I wanted to believe in something. I wanted to have faith, but what was on offer for me, some of it resonated, but so much of it didn't. So then I just kept going on my path, kind of responding to life, not consciously creating it, not questioning it, being led mostly by my ego, I'd say, until I was 32 years old, which is a big year. Around that age is a big year where you can have a large spiritual breakthrough. And that's what happened to me. And one of the most profound things that I learned from my NDE was this lifetime that I had, this particular lifetime where I had this cataclysmic trauma. Well, when I had Debbie on the show and she was talking about the different star systems, she was talking about the Lyran star system. And she started to talk about the Lyran wars. And during my NDE, I was receiving so much spiritual knowledge and downloads that I had never had before in this particular human experience I'm in right now. I mean, I knew it on a soul level, but my body didn't know it. And it got to times in the experience where I literally started to like short circuit or feel like I was just overwhelmed with data, like I couldn't possibly like process it. So to facilitate my understanding and my learning and to help me to not short circuit, Liv would sometimes give me information in a more basic way. So instead of saying I had a past lifetime in the Lyran star system, and this is where this particular cataclysmic past lifetime trauma occurred, it gave me planetary numbers. And it gave me a specific number. To be honest, like right now, I can't even remember what number it gave me. But when I was interviewing Debbie and she was talking about Lyra, I knew that this was the planet where I had the big experience. And there were many. You know, we've all lived many, many, many lifetimes. The listeners of this show, assuredly, I'm just getting a total yes from source. The listeners of this podcast who resonate with what I have to say, you definitely have lived many, many lifetimes in other star systems that have a much higher consciousness than what we're experiencing on Earth, which is pretty low in vibration comparatively. And we live here, most of us, in a duality consciousness where we feel separate from each other. We feel separate from source and higher self. You know, we feel like we're this alone individual entity having this experience. And because of duality, in a way we are, and we're not. That's what duality means. Two things that oppose each other that are both true. So yes, we are separate physical beings. And yes, we are connected to source, connected to higher self, and connected to each other. And from that connection, we know, or can access rather, all of our past lifetimes, all of our spiritual gifts, all of our soul experience. So many of us have had lifetimes. Correction, all listeners of this podcast have had lifetimes in unity consciousness, where you were connected to the divine. You did know your past lifetimes. So getting back to my interview with Debbie, she started talking about the Lyran planets and the Lyran wars and how absolutely devastationally traumatic they were. Trauma that went above and beyond anything we've really witnessed here on planet Earth. And my whole body just knew that was the one. Kind of my mother lode of past lifetime trauma. There was one lifetime in particular where it goes above and beyond. And it's hard for me to talk about, even though I've done so much healing on it. And I feel like the can of worms got reopened again, which is how healing works at this higher level of awareness. And so after the episode, I said to Debbie, can I book a one-on-one session with you? And she's like, well, I am booked out for the next 2 years, but if something opens up, I'll let you know. Got on the waiting list, and then something opened up, and I booked it. And we just had that reading, since it's been 2 weeks from around 2 weeks ago, from the time I'm recording this episode. I'm still processing it. I'm still integrating it. But in the session, I asked her to go to this lifetime. She didn't know anything about what Liv had shared with me. I did share my experience with her on her YouTube channel, but I didn't go into details at all. And even if you listen to the 3-part series on my podcast, there's a lot of details I leave out because, to be honest, I didn't realize all these details until this Akashic record reading. So my point is, there's no way that Debbie could have known about these details. But she described the same soul history that I got from my NDE, but she just added more layers of detail to it, layers that I couldn't have integrated in 2009 because, like I said, I was going into information overload. And when I thought about the purpose of this episode, is it just to share what Debbie told me? Like, what's in this for you? Which is what I always think about before I record any episode. How can I be in service to you? I thought that it was going to be about validation. Here, Debbie validated my NDE, and validation is an important thing for light workers because we're constantly working in the non-physical, something that you can't see with your eyes, smell physically with your nose, hear with your ears. We get it through senses. We sense, awareness, knowing. But after sitting with it, I realized it wasn't about validation. It was about the next layer of clarity, which was very liberating for me because there comes a point on the spiritual path where you become so connected to the divine, to your higher self, to what you know and understand about your soul experience. And there's always another layer to discover. But you become so surrendered and connected that you stop looking for someone or something outside of yourself to confirm what you already know. Instead, the right teachers simply help you see what you already know with greater depth and clarity. And that's a milestone of spiritual evolution and growth. So Debbie didn't validate my experience. She brought it into greater detail and life and understanding for me so I can integrate it to the next level, heal to the next level, understand to the next level, teach it to you to the next level. So let's get into some of what unfolded in this session. I booked with Debbie because I really just followed my higher self. And when we talked on my podcast and then her YouTube channel, I just felt really connected to her. And I knew she was a person of light. I don't go to too many humans for spiritual teachings and learnings. So when I am guided to a human being and not just connecting to source or some sort of non-physical consciousness, I know that there's a divine reason, like there's a higher reason why I'm being guided to a particular human. So I was definitely guided to her because I really knew that I could trust what was going to come through. When we get to the reading, it's just really deep and rich. It's hard for me to talk about. I might have to go into a channel state to really express. I think it's too hard for my human brain to share. So I'm just going to kind of channel this a bit. She talked about this lifetime. You know, we all had, light workers have had many lifetimes in the Lyran star system, and there's more than one planet. And I had a lot of beautiful, happy, amazing lifetimes in the star system, which was this really beautiful, extraordinary place of high consciousness. And at a certain point, I got called or invited to join a starship to another planetary system to learn about music. And I'm just pausing here to ask, was I Was I physically okay, so this is a part I don't understand, so I'm gonna channel the answer here, and, as I talk and as I share all of this, I just invite you to be in the receiving mode to what feels true to you, what lands. I'm not telling you to believe what I'm about to tell you. I'll never tell you that. I'll never say, "Believe me." But what I will say is if you feel called to me and you feel trust in your heart for what I have to share, then trust but verify. Not validate unless you feel like sometimes validation is required, but verify it with your higher self, verify it with your own experience, verify it with your body, what feels true. So I'm just going to share what comes through, and some of it might feel right in alignment for you. Some of it might feel quite out there. Some of it might feel unsure. So just receive it as you receive it. Be open to what I have to share and then verify what is true for you. So I'm just asking the question, did I incarnate in a new star system, or was I literally on a starship in this one lifetime? Okay, so what I'm receiving is I met someone on a Lyran lifetime from the Cirrus star system. And that is a star system where they have advanced and amazing music. So in this lifetime, when the wars began, I was a freedom fighter and I was a musician that had a really large following. I had learned this new instrument that was something like a piano, whatever the Lyran version was of a piano, and it was unique. I had learned how to play it, and a lot of people didn't know about it. It was a new instrument. And because of that, I was able to really gain this large following, and I guess in this lifetime, I had a real healing ability through my music and a connecting and a love. And this, love, healing, and connection was not what the powers that be that were trying to thwart the system and, keep the system enslaved, really. Became a big threat to them. So what happened was, a lot of targeting against me and my family and my loved ones, and a lot of torture and a lot of pain and emotional trauma that went above and beyond. And I didn't have that experience at all in this lifetime. So I'm not saying that I am a, victim of trauma. So her, yes, validating the story and giving me clearer details all these years later than when it first arrived to me, it created this depth to my whole soul experience that I've never had before in this lifetime anyway. It enabled me to really zoom out way beyond my current little ecosystem in my current life and zoom out to my soul experience and just how long and vast and deep it's been, and all the places I've been on a soul level, and how one lifetime, like the lifetime we're now, is just a drop in the bucket of our experience. And at the same time, it's a very, very important drop. It's intentional. It was thought out. You considered all of the wounds that you needed to heal, the people you needed to see again, all the soul contracts, so that you could set yourself up to learn, heal, grow, and evolve on your soul path, which is the whole point of incarnation. So I would love to just share, because maybe this is going to turn something on in you the way Debbie did for me. a little introduction to some of the galactic soul lineages. Now listen, I'm not an expert at all. I'm just going to share with you the little I know and announce that I'm being called to learn more about these different soul lineages so it can better inform my work, because our soul tale extends much, much, much longer before our time on this planet. So there are many star systems discussed in many different traditions, but I'm just choosing the 4 that come up often and that many light workers feel connected to. But there are more. So certainly if you're interested in this, I do recommend connecting with Debbie and stick around to Soul Live Radio, because I plan to deepen my own knowledge on these star systems and also share about them here. So the Lyran, as we've already talked about, is often described as one of the earliest humanoid civilizations, or the birthplace of the human. It is associated with creativity, sovereignty, freedom, individuality, and the original expression of the soul. Many traditions describe cataclysmic wars that scattered souls across the galaxy, and that's what many of you will have stored away in your soul DNA, is trauma from one or more of the Lyran wars. Most light workers have that in their soul experience, and they carry deep soul wounds from these experiences, from these Lyran wars, around loss, persecution, survival, and literally having their worlds destroyed. So I'm going to dedicate an entire future episode to explore past lifetime trauma from Lyran wars. But I myself am really in this processing energy right now. So I wanted to kind of do this introductory episode first, and then definitely more to follow here. Then there's the Syrian star system, which is associated with wisdom, leadership, mastery, sacred knowledge, advanced civilizations. They're often described as builders, organizers, teachers, and guardians. Many people with Syrian connections feel called to help humanity evolve by creating strong foundation and spiritual structures. Then there's the Arcturian, often described as highly evolved healers, connected with multidimensional healing, consciousness, energetic technology, and spiritual evolution. Many healers and intuitives resonate with Arcturian energy. I do. For example, because of its emphasis on transformation and expanding awareness. Then there's the Palladian, associated with unconditional love, compassion, nurturing beauty, creativity, relationships, and emotional healing, often described as supporting humanity's awakening through the heart. A lot of light workers resonate with Palladian energy because of its gentle yet deeply transformative frequency. I don't think it's particularly helpful to become attached to labels like I'm a Palladian or I'm an Arcturian. So we've all lived in many different places over a long evolutionary journey. And you do have an origin which you might feel most connected to. But I believe the more interesting question is, what gifts, what lessons, what healing, what wisdom am I bringing to this lifetime? And so moving back into this deeper lesson, the reading taught me unexpectedly was, in the years following my near-death experience, I felt very alone, and I didn't know anyone else personally who'd had such an experience. I was just listening to the telepathy tapes. They had a new season, and I just listened to the first episode of this podcast, and it was about near-death experiences. And I really appreciate this podcast a lot and its host, whose name is escaping me right now, but we'll link in the show notes, because she's writing this spiritual podcast and she's really telling it in a way to reach mainstream listeners who don't have a lot of experience. Because when I was listening to this NDE episode, she was talking about it like, oh my gosh, can you imagine it might be possible that we lived many lifetimes? And as I listen, I'm like, of course it's possible. Like, there's almost this annoyance inside of me that will pop up. I honestly don't think it's a shadow. I'm not in pain. I'm not angry. It's not even low vibrational. It's almost like my soul is saying, yes, of course, of course. I think there's this piece of us who spent a lot of time in advanced civilizations where you know all about quantum physics and how the universe works, and it's not a secret. It's not a great secret. You know, spirituality on Earth is mysticism and is shrouded in secrecy and, you know, secret societies, and those who are spiritual are treated as outcasts. And in other star systems, it's not that way. People just know. You know the air quotes secrets of the universe because you just know they're not secrets, they're just the teachings. So anyway, listening to this podcast, I was really happy that it was sharing this knowledge, and it was interviewing really great people who, some of them I knew, some of them I didn't know, but they all seemed to know quite a lot about NDE and have a long body of research about it, or they themselves had their own NDE. And you know, had I had a podcast like that to listen to in 2009, oh my gosh, my experience would have been much different. But back then, there were probably people out there, there were some resources out there, but I didn't know about them. And it's certainly not as accessible as it is today. You know, 16, 17 years ago, I was just looking for validation, anything to validate my story, anything to validate that huge, amazing, impossible, enlightened, painful, wondrous, difficult experience that I endured that started in Madrid and ended in Paris. I call it my Paris story. You know, I was desperate for validation. I was desperate to be seen. I just wanted to say to the world, do you have any idea what just happened to me? Do you have any idea how profound it was? And again, not even from an egoic perspective. I think it was my soul crying out, listen, wake up. Do you have any idea what we have access to as humans? That we're just scratching the surface? That so much of this knowledge about spirituality is being actively thwarted or distorted so we can't access our true power? Do you have any idea, world? You know, I was like shouting it into the abyss. And I don't know that I ever got the validation I was seeking at that time. Like, I was just looking for someone somewhere to say, Allison, I see you. I hear you. I know your story is real. I see this experience. I understand it. I never really got that, but I kept going anyway. And then I started to share the story with a larger audience. And then I finally had the courage to record the podcast episode. And then something shifted. And I stopped being afraid to talk about it. I stopped caring whether people believed me or thought I had gone crazy, or I stopped caring how they perceived it because I realized that it was none of my business. It was none of my business how they perceived it, whether it landed, whether it didn't. I just knew in my heart that those meant to receive from it will receive. And listening to the telepathy tapes episode on NDE made me realize that I want to start talking about my story more, because I feel like human consciousness is now ready to hear it and understand it in ways that, it just wasn't ready. It was just too soon 10 years ago, certainly 15 years ago. Now, when I'm meeting with a one-on-one client, I'll just get this hit that I need to share my NDE story with this client. So I'll say, hey, have you heard the story? And if they say no, I'll just send them the podcast episode. And 100% of the time when that happens, this person comes back to me and said, oh my God, Allison. And they share what they received from it. And what they received had nothing to do with my story or what I went through. Because what I went through, it doesn't matter. It was just something that I had to go through to heal from these Lyran wars. But what makes the story powerful is not my experience. It's what it opens and activates inside of you, what it awakens, what memory it turns on, what connection to a past lifetime trauma that it triggers so that you can heal it. And I'm going to warn you, it can sometimes be very profound if it clicks awake a certain trauma that has the characteristics of this level of intensity. And if that's the case, if that happens, find a trusted healer. Come to me, reach out to me. I really believe it's such a huge part of my soul mission to help light workers here on planet that chose this lifetime in part to heal from some of the traumas from the Lyran wars. And specifically from the Lyran wars, but not only. Any of the big past lifetime traumas. We all have big past lifetime traumas from Earth. So it's not like Earth doesn't have its traumas. It certainly does. But these Lyran war traumas just take it to levels that are truly hard to put in words. But your physical body can feel it. When I talk about it, I don't know, if you watch me on YouTube, you can see me. I'm hunched over, I'm hunched over in my chair. I'm talking slow. My whole body feels heavy. It slows down time. And I think it's because I'm just tapping into this energy. It's so dense. It's so heavy. It's so layered. It's never, ever, 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 ever going to be healed in a one and done. These type of wounds get healed layer by layer. These are the phone book healings, where you can imagine the old phone books that we used to use before the internet, how thin those pages were. And one trauma wound from any big past lifetime or current lifetime trauma can be like a phone book. And every time you do a healing, you're just flipping one page over. But when you heal again and again and again and again, you eventually get through the whole book. But it usually takes more than one lifetime to heal the whole book. And anything that doesn't get healed gets carried with you like luggage to the new lifetime. So that's why it's important to check in. I turned 50 this year. And I feel like I'm 35. Sometimes I feel like I'm 28. Sometimes I feel like I'm 80. I have friends, a lot of my best friends are 10 years younger than me or 10 years older than me. I have my best friends from college and they're all my age. So I've got that core group. But beyond that, a lot of my friends are not my age. Because I don't know, I've never really associated with my age. I've always felt wiser, but I've also felt very youthful and sort of silly and playful. So on one level, I feel like I'm somewhere between 28 and 35. On another level, if you look at my 6 profile line, I feel like I'm somewhere in my late 60s, early 70s as like the wise village elder. But I have to say, for the first time in my life, hitting 50, I'm like, whoa, my life isn't going to live forever. I'm not going to live forever. I really have this newfound awareness of like, dude, I need to like, it doesn't feel low vibe. It doesn't feel like pressure. It feels more like wake up, like aligned motivation. I'm 50. My higher self has told me how long I can expect to live. And as far as I know, I'm going to live into elderhood in this lifetime. Of course, you never know what timeline could play out. But let's say that I live into elderhood. Um, you know, and I don't want to work forever. I want to spend my final years rescuing greyhounds. Hopefully by then, greyhound racing will be completely illegal throughout the world. Breeding practices will be monitored and ethical. And I'd love to be part of that change. So, in my retirement, I want to rescue greyhounds, lobby for the protection of greyhounds. Like, first of all, I don't want to have it to be a thing where I have to rescue greyhounds because I just want people ethically treating all animals with love and compassion as living beings of light. And until we get to that point, I want to, be part of that change. I have this vision of me with like 5 or 6 Spanish greyhounds walking down the street, and everyone calls me the crazy greyhound lady, and I wear that as a badge of honor. My husband is not so keen on this idea, but I'm working on him. And I'm just playing with grandchildren and traveling and hanging out and making delicious vegetarian dishes. I like to cook, not from pressure, but from a place of joy. So, like, I want to have those golden years, okay? But I want to work because I love my work. And I feel like there's so much for me to do. And I feel like I'm just getting started as a 6th line who has just moved in. Like I just turned 50, about a month ago. I've just moved into my 3rd phase of my life where I'm now becoming the role model, right? But I have this awareness that I have this finite amount of time to fulfill my soul contracts, to leave the impact that I feel for the legacy, for the footprint I leave behind, to be the best, parent and sibling and daughter and friend I can be, and certainly the best coach and healer and, spiritual guide I can be. So I'm really now to this phase in my experience where I want to get very clear, higher self, what are you calling me towards? What do I need to get hot on? That if I don't, focus on something now, I could get behind or I could not fulfill it in this lifetime. And I know I don't need to fulfill everything because that's impossible, but what did I agree to fulfill in this lifetime to keep me on track and in alignment to my evolutionary journey? So I don't have to unnecessarily carry forward any luggage of pain and healing to a future lifetime that I don't need to. And if I do, and if any of us do, well, then that was what was meant to happen. It's never an accident. It's never you messed up, so now you're punished with carrying luggage of emotional trauma with you to a new lifetime. It's just alignment and our higher intention to always be moving back into alignment because we always fall out. But every time we move back in, if we've done the healing and learned the lesson, and if we're moving back into alignment, we've done the healing and learned the lessons. And because of that, we're now moving back into higher alignment. And so I'm asking higher self, what are you really calling me to? What do you really want my business to look like? what is my journey for this next act? I'm just going to call it the second half. Let's imagine I live to be 100. So now I'm moving into the second half of my life. Like, what are you really calling me to? I don't have the luxury now of playing around. We all have in our 20s and 30s and even 40s. But when you get into 50s and 60s and 70s, and I tend to attract an audience who has a lot of soul experience and human experience. So there's a lot of people listening to this podcast who are over the age of 50 and 60 and 70 and 80. And so whatever age you are, take this as an opportunity to just check in with higher self. What are you really calling me towards? What am I really being called towards at this point in my journey? Because you're always going to get a different answer to that question. And you're never going to get I shouldn't say never. I think it will be rare for any of us to get the download of the 125,000 soul contracts that we were meant to fulfill in this lifetime, and how we've done, because we all have anywhere between a couple dozen and a couple 100,000 soul contracts to fulfill in a particular lifetime, depending on how long your lifetime is and what you agreed to. And every lifetime is different, and more soul contracts doesn't mean better. It's just different. And some soul contracts are fulfilled very quickly and easily. So you can't map them all, or it's not worth your time and effort to map them all. It would take you out of alignment to do it. So the only thing you can do, or I should say the best thing you can do, I believe, is to just check in. Is there a soul contract you're asking me, calling me to focus on today so I can shift into higher alignment of fulfilling it? And simply, higher self, what are you really calling me towards? Am I in alignment to that? Yes? Great. What inspired action are you calling me to? Am I out of alignment to that? Yes. What do I need to heal and learn so I can return to my higher alignment? And I'm thinking, I'm receiving. That's my invitation for you this week. I ditched my notes a long time ago, so I don't even know. I just went on a bit of a ramble. I have a dear friend that I do projector soundboarding with, and I realize that I don't always soundboard. I call it my projector ramble. I blame my open throat center, which can be verbose sometimes, and nonlinear, where I start one story and then another, and then I come back. I try to come back to all the stories I start, and I know I'm not 100% successful in that. So my apologies whenever I start a story that I don't finish. But hopefully I wrapped up all the stories I started in this episode, and it leads us to our invitation, which is to check in. Check in on which soul contract you're being called to just check in on. Is it something from a Lyran war? Is it something from something else? If you are feeling a deeper wound from this sort of deeper trauma we're talking about, do reach out to me. Let me know. This is something that I support clients with in my signature certification program, Soul Blueprint, where we go very deep on the healing. And then we also go very deep on finding the light in our wounding, how we retrieve our soul mission and our soul contracts and our unique genius from our spiritual gift of healing. Because it's in that darkness where we find our light and where we find our purpose and where we find our higher alignment. So I invite you to check in. Reach out to me if you feel called. You can DM me, email me, book a time to chat. There's a link in the show notes to get on my calendar. If your higher self is calling you to me, there's a reason. So, I'm just here to connect with light workers, whether you ever plan to invest in any of my offers or ever enroll in Soul Blueprint, it doesn't matter to me if your higher self is saying yes and my higher self is saying yes. Then there's something important that wants to be exchanged. So hop on my calendar if you feel so called, because I went through it alone. The biggest spiritual experience I ever had by far in my life. And I navigated it pretty much all alone, except for with non-physical consciousness, which is not nothing, which is actually like, okay, like at the end of the day, I think it's one of the biggest lessons that we're here to learn is that ultimately we can't really rely on people, on other humans. We should never rely on them to be seen, to be validated, to be understood. We have our divine guidance team, which is here. And ultimately, the only true validation, the only true acceptance, the only true feelings of being heard is understood is when we do all of that for ourselves. All right, my dear ones, I guess I could keep rambling, but I am getting a wrap it up from the higher self. So I really hope you received something true and deep and meaningful today, or just found what I had to share interesting. I appreciate you each and every week. And as always, until next time, may you be soul alive.